Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Ayman, if you don't know that already. And firstly, I'm sorry I didn't post anything last week. I'm currently suffering from bronchitis at the moment. And between coughing my lungs out and having a fever, and the fact that my period started today, my productivity is at about 0, so I'm sorry about that. And if you're wondering about my hat and my hair, I think it looks pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, but I actually just did it because I was sweating a lot and my hair was a mess. So I was like, how do I look presentable without actually feeling presentable? And this is what I came up with. So yes, sorry about that, you guys. But if it makes me feel any better, I'm probably gonna be sweating my tits off throughout this whole video. So I mean, you win some, you lose some, really. And before you guys ask, it is not COVID. I already got tested, it was negative. So I'm 100% sure it's bronchitis, so don't worry about that. I'm not gonna go out infecting everyone. So yes, without further ado, let's just get into it. Now, living in Canada where weed is very legal and abundant, it's never really been a cause of concern. I mean, you know what they all say, no one's ever died from smoking weed. And by they, I mean that one person that has their shit together while someone's high in the corner, just paranoid out of their minds. I know you can relate to that. Now that person now may need a new way to calm down their high paranoid friend though, since in this case, authorities pointed to weed as the reason for these boys' deaths. In today's episode of True Crime Thursday, we're going to be talking about the deaths of Kevin Ives and Don Henry, or how I've lovingly labeled the case the Unsolved train track murders. But before I get into this episode, you guys, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now, Skillshare is this online learning community that has thousands of classes that you can take no matter how skilled or unskilled you are at the topic. There are classes like animation, freelance and entrepreneurship, web development and more. And thankfully there are no ads and you can access all their premium classes for less than $10 a month with an annual prescription. So I mean, yes. And since I am a content creator on many platforms, I actually started taking this class called Powerful Storytelling Today's Strategies for Crafting Great Content, taught by Soledad O'Brien. And not only has this been helping me improve my storytelling and creating, it's part of their list of super popular classes taught by Black artists. And with all the events that occurred last year, I'm very glad I'm on a platform that supports the Black Lives Matter movement, since that's something that is very important to me. And I thought I would share the opportunity with you guys. So the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership, so you can just explore your creativity and give it a go. But without further ado, let's get the fuck into this case, starting off with the victims. The 17-year-old Kevin Ives and 16-year-old Don Henry lived in Bryant, Arkansas and labeled themselves as best friends. It's so weird, I was about to say Arkansas when I know it's Arkansas. Either way, they were getting ready for their senior year at Bryant High School and were apparently very popular at school. They were into very typical things like working on their cars, chilling with their girlfriends, and of course hunting. And I wish I knew more about the boys' personalities or their upbringing, but there's really not that much about the boys on the interwebs, so that is it for the victim's information. On to the case. Now, it was the 23rd of August 1987. Kevin and Don had decided to go out hunting that night and met up shortly after midnight. Now, they had planned to hunt in this wooded area near Don's house that also happened to be near this railroad. Now, little is known about what exactly happened with the boys that night, other than the fact they smoked some weed. When hours had passed and the boys failed to come home, their parents got extremely worried. And here's what their parents didn't know. At around 4 a.m. that morning, a 75-car, 6,000-ton cargo train was making its regular trip to Little Rock, which meant going through Bryant. The train was going at 50 miles an hour, and as it approached Bryant, the train's engineer Stephen Schroer noticed something on the tracks up ahead. Now, he couldn't quite make out what it was at first, but the closer the train got, the clearer it became. There were two boys laying down on the tracks, motionless, with what looked like a green tarp covering them. Now, Stephen sounded the diesel horn multiple times and even tried an emergency stop, but it was just too late. The train ran the two boys over and they were killed and dismembered. When the train eventually did come to a stop, Stephen called the police and railroad authorities straight away, and they reached the scene about 40 minutes later. Did you hear that? I almost said reached the scene. Now either way, the police never found this tarp that Stephen said was covering the bodies, but they did find Don's rifle and flashlight near the bodies. The boys were using this hunting technique called spotlighting, where you basically flash the flashlight in the prey's face and they kind of get stunned and then you just shoot them, and that is actually illegal. Either way, moving on. Now, it took authorities a day to identify the boys through their dental records and then told their families, who were utterly heartbroken. A week after the boys' funeral, the chief medical examiner, Dr. Fahmy Malik, claimed the autopsy results pointed to the deaths being a suicide, which the parents heavily disputed. The doctor then said the boys were in some psychedelic-induced coma from smoking the equivalent of 20 joints. He claimed they must have fallen asleep on the tracks and the train's horns just failed to wake them up. Again, the victims' parents refused to accept that conclusion, and they had a lot of questions about these people's conclusions, and I would too. Firstly, the parents had no idea the boys even did drugs, which fair enough, I feel like most parents don't know that about their kids. Secondly, they didn't understand why the boys would lay down identically next to each other if they were so high. Why wouldn't they just come home? Don's dad found it really strange how his son's rifle was on the ground, because he shared that Don took really good care of his gun and he would never let it get scratched, so why would he just put it on the gravel? The case was closed and deemed accidental, but about 5 months later, in March of 1988, Don and Kevin's parents held a huge press conference. Since the case had already garnered so much attention, their hope was to get their son's case reopened, and they were successful. The next day, the case was reopened, and here's where shit got fucking slimy. A second opinion was offered by Dr. James Garriott, who said he doubted weed was the cause of their deaths. Now, anyone who has smoked ever, like regardless of how many joints someone can smoke, I fail to believe you can be in that much of an induced coma that you can't hear a train coming at you at full speed. Not only that, even if you smoke too much and you green out, like, it's easy to wake somebody up in that state. So I just fail to believe weed was the cause of these boys' deaths. The bodies were exhumed and a second autopsy was performed, and the pathologist concluded that they hadn't smoked 20 joints, it was more around 2 or 3, which was definitely not enough to incapacitate them the way they had been. What was even more suspicious was the fact that Don was already dead before the train hit, while Kevin was already unconscious. Don had been stabbed in the back and Kevin's skull had been crushed by the rifle, meaning both boys were dead before they were run over, meaning these accidental deaths were in fact homicides. So what could have happened? On to the theories. Theory number 1. The first theory is pretty fucked up and involves a police cover-up. Honestly, why is it that the people who are meant to protect us the most are just the most corrupt ones? Firstly, the authorities weren't sure of any facts surrounding the case except for the fact that they were overconfident that no foul play was involved. Even the tarp, Stephen claimed he saw a tarp covering the boys, but the police said they never found this tarp anywhere. Why, you may ask? Boys in their right minds, high or otherwise, would not lay on top of train tracks and cover themselves in a tarp. You know who would cover the boys with a tarp? Someone who killed them and was hoping the train wouldn't notice their bodies underneath the tarp and would just run them over. The families of the boys also hired a private investigator to try and get some closure, but anytime he tried to talk with different authority members, he was met with so much resistance and everyone just refused to give him any information. Now, why would the authorities be so unwilling to help out unless they were somehow involved? Kevin's mum Linda went in on the Salem County Sheriff James H. Steed Jr. by saying he didn't do anything to try and investigate the case, and then a secret attorney approached the family saying if they withdrew their criticism of James, they would finally get the investigation they always wanted, which seems pretty fucking corrupt to me. Theory number 2. The second theory involves a possible murderer, a man in military fatigues. Now, around 1 week before the murders, a random man wearing military fatigues was seen near the train tracks and he was acting hella sus. When a policeman tried to talk to him, the guy opened fire on him before running into the woods. Now, if that wasn't worrying enough, the same man was seen again the night the boys were killed. Now, apparently the boys ran into some men who were part of a local meth dealing ring or had found a drug drop from an airplane. Either way, they had seen too much and had to be offed, and the reason the police didn't do anything is because some of them were involved in the ring as well. In 2018, new information came out from Billy Jack Haynes, a wrestler from the 80s, and he said he had seen the boys get murdered. At the time, he was a drug trafficker and was hired as an enforcer for this politician drug dealing ring in Arkansas. He was contacted to provide some muscle at a drug stop and saw locals kill the boys. Theory number 3. The third and final theory has everything to do with Dr. Fahmy Malik. According to the staff that worked under him, Malik would keep a bunch of outdated crime lab stationery which he'd used to falsify his findings in autopsy reports right before certain cases went to court. What's more is that the hospital the boys stayed at kept no records of them ever being there. The only thing that was kept was a medical report by an EMT who rushed to the tracks the night of the murders. In his report, it said the boys' blood lacked a lot of oxygen, meaning the boys were 100% dead before they were run over. So was the whole town involved in this fucking cover-up? The medical staff and the authorities? I don't know why Dr. Malik would falsify his findings unless he got a cut of money from someone, I'm guessing a politician. And that is it for today's case, you guys. I'm sorry if it seemed like I was out of breath at some points. I'm honestly sweating a lot right now. I feel like I'm going through a hot flash. But I hope you enjoyed this case. Honestly, 100% I feel like they were killed because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. It must have been some drug deal gone wrong and they just happened to be there. I fail to believe you can smoke so much that you put yourself in a coma. Like, I fail to believe that. I've been around too many friends who smoke a lot to believe that. I'm sorry. Let me know which theory tickles your fancy the most in the comments below. As always, I will catch you in the next one, hopefully when I'm feeling a little bit better. And do remember to check out the Skillshare link in the description box below. I'll see you next time, you guys. Bye!